Welcome! A couple of weeks ago, I showed you how I make these really big flower pots or planters. I'm not still sure what they're called. These ones don't have a hole in the bottom, so they're just made to cover up these ugly black flower pots. So it's a decorational pot. This one turned out really nice. It's not glazed yet, but I'll do that later today. But I also did another one that's even bigger. And it does look nice, but I sort of failed. It's not very functional, so it hasn't been bisque-fired. I'm just going to throw this out. As you may recall, the problem with this was that I initially made the bottom too thin. So I added some more clay and I tried to massage it into each other and hope that it would stick. It didn't. So when it dried, the button just fell out. And now it's very decorative, but completely non-usable. But I still need that because I have a pot that is super wide and super tall that I need to cover because it's really ugly. So today I'm going to try and make it again, but better. Now I dressed up for wheel throwing and I'm ready to do the pot. But there's a few things I want to do before I start. First of all, I'm making it for this ugly plastic pot. I need to fit this. And I still want basically the same shape that I did before, so going out, but then going in a little bit to make it like a roundish feel. But this size, of course, have to be able to enter the top, otherwise it won't get in there. And the button have to be as wide as this, a little bit more. And I need to shrink it into account. The total shrink rate for this clay, for bisque and glaze, is about 10%. So I need to keep that in mind. So let's first measure the button, because that's the base that I'm going to throw. So that needs to be big enough. And this is about, I'm not sure you can see that, but that's about 20 centimeter. So I'm thinking it should be at least 23, 24. I don't want it to be too narrow. So that's what I'm aiming for as a base. The top is 26, but again, it needs to be wider and needs to have a little bit of space and need to be able to shrink. So I would say at least 35. So now we got that. And I'm ready to throw. Oh yeah, another thing. I challenged myself with this one. Maybe even more than I should, because I'm throwing it in reclaim. And as you may remember from the video I did about reclaiming, I put everything, all the clay. I use different clays. I put it all into the same bucket. I mix it up and I use it. So this is a mix between the black clay I use and the red clay I use. So I think mostly black clay for this one. So it's probably going to be on the dark side, but I have a solution for that because I don't want it to be that dark, my flower pot, in the end. I'll get back to that. So let's start out. This is about 5 kilo. So what is that? 10 pounds or just about that? 9 pounds, something like that. You guys have to calculate that. We still use metrics here in Europe. So. Especially with a big chunk of clay, I always spend a little bit of time slab centering it. It's just going to make it so much easier. The good thing about reclaimed clay is that it is, or tend to be, when I do it, a little softer. A little less plastic, not so good. But the fact that it is a little bit softer makes it easier to center, makes it easier to make the base, but it makes it a little less stable when I have to pull up the walls. So the good and bad things. And there could be a little bit of inconsistencies, even though I did put it on storage for a month or 2 months, and I did wedge it up really well, but who knows. And there's a risk that there's something lost in there, so I have to be a little bit careful. So anyway, I will see how that goes. So now we got it centered, and as expected, it wasn't that difficult, even though it is 5 kilo. Don't be scared about the size. It is mostly a question of technique. With reclaimed or soft clay like this, it's actually not that difficult. So as you see, I started out with quite a large base, but even have to extract a little bit more. But now I'm going to start with the opening. And this time, try not to make the button too thin. In fact, for a flower pot like this, I don't want the walls and I don't want the button to be very thin. Of course, I don't want it to be like 5 centimeters thick, but I don't want it to be maybe 1.5, maybe 1 centimeter, but definitely not any less than that. And as always, if you are in doubt about how thick the button is, use a potter's needle. Now this is a little bit dirty, I'll clean it. Stick it in, put your finger, take it out, and now see, this is actually good. So I definitely don't want this to be any thinner. I may want to compress it a little bit more, but not thinner. I do, however, need it to be a little wider. So you can always use the pot as a template, and it's almost there. We need a few more centimeters also to shrink it into account. So let's see again. And yeah, now it looks good. It's got, what is it, like 3 centimeters or something, 4 centimeters. I think that's going to be good. So now I just want to make sure that the base here is good. And for that, I have this spatula or whatever it's called. It's from my kitchen. Or actually, I bought it for this. And I grinded the corner a little bit. And that is very good for compressing the bottom of a big bowl pot like this, because it's very easy to hold on to. That way we get a completely flat and compressed button. Go all the way out in the corner. So, only scraped off very little. So that's good. As always, when you throw in sections, you want to make sure that it's as well centered as possible. So now I'm ready to pull the walls. And take it easy, because remember, it's a big pot. It takes a while to get around. So if you pull up too quickly, you're not going to pull up the wall equally. Of course, we want that. And always start out by pulling it a little bit inwards, because it's easier to expand it than it is to make it smaller. I don't want to drip too much water on this, because it is reclaimed, it is already soft, but now I can feel that my hands are not getting into dry areas, and then you hold on to the clay, and that can like push it out of shape. Now, I think we need to go out a little bit more on this space section, because we can take a look again with this pot. Yeah, you see, it's fine at the bottom, but already here it's beginning to get a little bit too narrow. So it has to go out just a little bit. Not too much, but just a little bit. So for that, I'm just going to use a rib on the outside. And I'm going to hold a sponge on the inside just to make sure that it's not getting too dry. And as always, don't push it too much at a time. Take it easy, just a little bit for every round. Oh, This way you also get some of the slip, the wet part of the clay away, which sort of weakens the pot, so it's nice to get rid of that now. Yeah. Let's just check with the pot again. And yeah, plenty of room. And now it's difficult for you to see, of course, but if I put it on one side here, I can see that now the shape is almost following the pot. So it gets out in the same. Now, of course, I got a little bit of dirt in here. Yeah. So now I think the shape and the size and everything is fine and ready to do the next section. So what I want to do now, before I prepared, I'll get back to you on that in a second, is that I just want to make sure that the top here is completely even and ready to get the next section on top. Now, as I spoke about before, there are many ways you can attach the two sections. Some do it flat to flat, like now, it's just a flat surface, and on the other one it will be flat as well. Some like to make a curve inside and the other way on the top and put it together. I usually like to do let me just get a small tool for that. I usually like to do a small groove into it. So I make a groove and I make a point on the other one, and it helps me kind of align it when I put it together. But I mean, there are many ways to do this. The important thing is that it needs to be very centered, very stable, and it needs to be glued together so perfect that in the end it feels like there's just one pot. Expand it a little bit with my finger here. And I think that should be enough to align the next section. So 2 things I want to do now, besides getting clean. I want to measure the size and I want to dry it. And because now it's too soft. If I put another section on top of this, it's going to collapse. So we need a little more. Strength in the clay, and to do that, we will dry it. Some people use a gas blower. I don't have a gas blower good enough for this, so I use a heat gun. So let's go ahead with that. I'm not going to show you all of the drying. It can take, I don't know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes or something of blowing. It depends, of course, on how wet your clay is. I'm not going to show you all that. One thing to keep in mind when you're drying it is that you want the lower part up until a few centimeters before the part you want to connect to be the most dry. But this, of course, where you need to connect the other part, cannot be completely dry, because if it is, it won't connect, it won't glue together. And also, usually dry it a little bit on both on the inside and the outside. Now, I think it's dry enough, and one of the ways you can check it is to just very lightly hold onto your wall and wriggle it a little bit. It should wriggle just a little bit because you want it to be soft enough to glue to the next section, but you want a certain stiffness. And it's a matter of experience. If it's too soft and you put the next section on and it's too heavy, it will collapse. You find out that way. But I think this is good enough now. So I'll just let it slowly spin and go and do the other one. And unlike the first time I did this pot and failed, I didn't have another wheel. So I will have to take this off, throw the next section, take that off, put this first section back on, and put the second section on top. But now, as you may have seen in some of my last videos, I got a second wheel. It's not a big strong one like the Shimpo, it's a small one, but I think it will be okay to do the next section for this. Anyway, I'm gonna try. It's gonna make it a whole lot easier and fast to do. Oh yeah, one thing I almost forgot. Before I throw the next one, of course, I need to measure the exact width of this. And I'm using a caliper to do that because it's gonna make it much easier to adjust the other one. Now, let me see here. And I want to measure, in my case, the middle of the groove, because that's where the point of the next one is going to be. A little bit too little. And yeah, this is perfect. So this is the size that I need on the top of the other one. And I could measure it here. It's about 29 centimeter. The other wheel is only 25 centimeter wide, the bed. But remember, it's going to be turned around, so the bottom becomes the top. And that's fine, because I can always expand that. But the top have to be this width, which is about 29. So let's go ahead with that. Now I'm ready to throw the next section. And as I mentioned, I'm going to do it on my secondary wheel. And this is not the same kind that I use for my primary pot, which is a Shimpo. It's a high quality, very durable wheel that can take, I don't know, 50 kilo of clay, or a lot of clay. It's very similar to Brent and Scott wheels that I think are more common in the US. Shimpo is very common over here in Europe. This is a very cheap wheel. It actually only costs 10% of my Shimpo. So the Shimpo is about $1,500 and this is about $150, roughly. It's from Vevor, a company that sent it to me for review. And when I first looked at it, I was like, oh, maybe it can do a kilo, maybe 2 kilo, maybe a good beginner's wheel. But now I have made bed pins on it. I drilled that. I have a video about how I drilled it into the wheel head, and I got some bed mates for it. And I tried 2 kilo, worked great. And I tried 3 kilo, and it also worked great. But now I'm gonna try almost 5 kilo, and I'm gonna be surprised if it works. But it is soft, the clay, it is reclaimed. So, and that means the drag is not so much or so heavy. So maybe it will work. It will jump around a little bit, but that's fine. So let's see if it works. It's definitely struggling. I'm actually surprised that it's not breaking down. But now we have it almost centered, which is of course the hardest part of the on the wheel, because that's where most of the drag is. And so far it survived. And as you can see, I'm going almost to the edge because it needs to be wider at the top, which is the bottom now, than this wheel head is. It's only 25 centimeter, but we need to go to 29, which is only very little extra, so it's not a big problem. We can easily expand that. And so for this second section and a third, if I choose to use that, I'll do that, it needs to go all the way down to the wheel head, because of course we need a hole in the top. However, I don't want that hole to go all the way to the edge, because that way we're only going to have the width of the walls to stick to the bed, and that's usually not enough. So I'm just going to make a hole, that's maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 centimeter, and leave the bottom walls very thick, because they have more grip on the bed, and it's going to make it a little more stable. Otherwise it may glide off or completely drop off when I turn the bed around. So we'll go down in the middle to the wheel head. That's fine. And I'm going to expand it. It is almost more than this poor little fellow can handle, but I think it's going to work. I am, I am impressed. Not so much with my own throwing skills, but with the fact that this rather tiny wheel can actually handle this much clay. And I know some of you guys asked me where I got this rib from, and from my workshop. It's just a piece of hardwood that I cut and that I grinded. It's very easy to make ribs like that. And again, just like the first section, I really don't want it to be too wet because it is a very soft clay, but I need it to be at least lubricated enough so my hands don't stick to it. So let's take the caliper and see where we are. Yeah, that's fine. It's too small now, which is good. I want it to be too small at this point because, again, when we have a wide shape like this, if it gets too wide, it's very difficult to get it smaller again. So it's always better to have it too narrow at this point. It's very easy to expand it. And usually expands really, really quickly. As you see, it's almost the size we need now. So I just want to make sure now that it's completely even. And of course down here we have way, way, way too much clay. But that's okay because it's that's what we're going to expand and pull. So no problem there. Now I'm just trying to make it into sort of like a pointy shape here, so it will fit into the groove that we made on the first section. And I will check again. Yeah, it's almost perfect. Maybe 1 millimeter wider or something, but not much more than that. Just want to get off the slip from the inside, because that's going to weaken the pot as well. Yeah, this looks perfect. So now I just want to make sure that it's completely even and looks pretty good. And now it's time to dry this and put it on top of the first section. And I just want to check again, and it's perfect. So I'll do the same thing. I'll use my blow dryer and I will dry this, and I'll get back to you when it's ready to put on top of the first section. Now I'm ready to put the second section on top of the first. It is still just spinning a little bit on the little wheel, and I'm ready to prepare to put them together, because what I want to do is I want to scratch and score and slip, I think it's called. Basically, I'm just going to scratch this groove, and I'm going to scratch the connecting part on the second wheel. I'm going to add a little bit of slip. I just want to do my best to make sure that they stick together, and there's no air bubbles or anything in there. So I'm just going to scratch it up like this a little bit. I'm going to add, I have some slip thinking, maybe a little bit, or maybe I have some slip here. Yeah, just like this. I'm just going to put this into the groove. Not so much, just a little bit. Yeah, it's very soft slip here. It's fine. I'm just going to wet it just a little bit. Yeah. So now I'm going to do the same thing on the little wheel. So now the tricky part and the one that potentially can go very wrong. I'm going to take the second section, turn it around and put it on top of the first one. So when you turn it, and I know I said this many times before, but I will repeat myself, don't turn it slowly, because if you do that, it will bend. So I usually throw it up in the air and turn it around in like one go, because that way you won't have that problem. So 1, 2, 3. There we go. And this is the first test. It's stuck. And now I'm going to put it as precisely as I can and make sure that it's fit. And it does. And first test is, did it bend? Can it bear? Is it strong enough? And I usually knock it just a little bit to make sure that it's connected. And it looks like it's good enough. And when I turn it, I mean, of course, it's not perfect yet, but it looks okay. So before I remove the bat, sometimes I do it before, sometimes I do it after. Actually, I think I'm going to do it after. First step is to then cut it loose. And I usually use my chest to support it, because otherwise I risk that it will bend. So I do it like that. Now we can remove the bat. There's a lot of clay here because they didn't cut it so precise, but that's fine enough. And now we are ready to glue it together or massage it together. The first thing I always do is just wet it up here a little bit, because I don't want, when I stick my arm in here, I don't want it to hold on to the clay and pull it out of position. And maybe even make the hole a little bit bigger, but it's fine. And now I will hold my hand on the inside. I'll just scratch or take this extra clay that I have and trim it or scratch it into place. Remember, we want in the end these two pieces to act like one piece of clay. It is potentially the weak part of this sort of pot, but only if you don't connect them perfectly, which I hope we will. So I'm just going to do this on the outside first. Some people scratch it a little bit, but I think this should be good enough. That's what I usually do. And so now we sort of made it just roughly scratched together, and then slowly just using the rib to blend it into each other. And now, already now you see that it almost looks like it's always been one piece. So that's good. I'm going to use my finger on the inside and basically do the same thing. So make sure that the two pieces of clay become one. Once I open this up, I'll be able to see better and maybe do a little bit more. So far, so good. So now I need to open it up a little more, because of course that's what I said. My second wheel is not wide enough. It has to be, continue this shape out here. So about 29 or 30 centimeter, 35 centimeter. And right now it's only 25, or a little less than that. So to begin with, I'm just gonna push out a little bit of that clay we had at the bottom, which is now the top. And I'm not going to push it any more than that, because I may drag it out of position. So just going to wet it a little bit inside here. just so it's slippery and so that my hands don't stick to the clay. And again, don't try and move it all at once. Just do it, you know, step by step. Just a little bit at a time. And I will pull up some of the clay at the top, because right now it's like 3 centimeters thick. But I'm going to keep quite a lot of clay up there because I want a thicker top. I'm going to show you in the end why. So now we're slowly opening it up. I will need it to go out a little bit more because, as you can see, it's not wide enough for the pot to actually get in there. So it needs to be wider. But again, I'm gonna do that slowly. And this rib is actually good when you're dealing with a very big area like this. I'm just gonna take out some of the water because too much water got into the bottom, and I don't want it to soak too long, because if you let it soak in there, it's just gonna weaken it, and it's more likely to create S-cracks. We don't want that. And see, whenever it's possible, I try to connect my hands, and so they're not like free floating, because that's gonna make it more likely that it will wobble. So now we can start using this caliper to measure the width we need here as a minimum, because this is the width of the pot, but I will aim for something more like this, so we have at least a couple of centimeters more at the top. So at least something like that, and you can't see that now, but we have a couple of centimeters to go yet, so we'll slowly get there. And now it's also so open that I can use the rib on the inside. I'm going to use the rib on the outside and on the inside to make sure that the two pieces here are glued together perfectly. Yeah, now it looks fine on the inside too. Let's see. See, now we're getting close. I think actually it would be able to get in now, but I want it to be a little wider, and I want to make sure that it also works when it's dried. And see, now it's very close. Still need a little bit more. Sometimes with a big pot like this, it's difficult to get the right perspective when you're too close to it. So sometimes you need to move away from your wheel. So that's it. I managed to make a new pot, and this time I'm sure the button is not going to break because it's made in one piece. And I managed to glue the two pieces together really well. So I'm just going to let it slowly spin, probably until tomorrow, and I will do a little bit of trimming. I need to cut away a little bit down here, and I will add some white slip. I'm going to add some porcelain slip because I want a little bit of a lighter surface on the outside. I'm going to add a bit of roller texture and a little bit of some carved texture. But that's all for tomorrow. This is it I had for today. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please subscribe, share, write a comment, and come back next Sunday. We'll have another video released around 5 p.m. Central European Time. As usual, you can always count on that. unless I'm on vacation or something happens. But every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central European time, I will try and release a new long form video. So until then, I hope you enjoyed this and have a very good day.